I have a little story to tell, but before I do that, I'm gonna see if I can convince you of something that's a big pet peeve for me. I cannot stand this word, which I will not utter because I can't stand it. And the reason I can't stand it is suggests that creating a really highly valuable tech company is something that's weird or like doesn't exist. It's not like a weird thing. It's like something that all of you aspire to do, and I don't know why we call it that. I call them high impact companies or, you know, uh, great investments. But anyway, I don't use that word. So the story I want to tell is a personal story about New York and Boston. So I grew up in the Army. My dad was a career Army officer, moved a lot, went to MIT. And when I got out of MIT in 1983, my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, wanted to move to New York. And so I said, okay, fine, I'll move to New York. And at the time, a lot of my friends who were graduating from MIT were working in startups in the PC software industry, and there was a lot of that going on in Cambridge. And so I sort of naively thought, well, I'll move to New York and I'll work for a cool startup in New York. And I got down here, and there was literally none of that here. And so I was like, wow, what am I going to do? And I kind of was sort of had my heart set on working in startups. And I realized that what did exist here in New York was Wall Street and the finance industry. And so I was like, well, maybe there's some connection between that and startups. And I did some reading, and all of a sudden I found that there was this thing called venture capital. And it turned out that like the venture capital industry had a lot of presence here because a lot of the wealthy families and even some of the investment banks had venture capital organizations. So I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to become a venture capitalist, and then I can live in New York, because otherwise I'd have to move, and then my relationship would break up, and then I can invest in startups, and that's almost as cool as working in a startup. And so that's how I became a venture capitalist, and that is a true story. So sometimes you get to a place, and it's been a great career for me. It turns out that I'm pretty good at it, and I've done well with it. But it wasn't something that really happened with a particular amount of like planning, or like it wasn't a goal. I just kind of like landed on it, and it turned out to be the right answer. So what I'd like to talk a little bit about while I have your attention is financing your companies. Obviously, that's what I do. But the thing that I really want to talk about is what you really want is not money. What you really want is a highly aligned investor. And so a lot of people, when they're just getting going, they just like, I need $1 million, or I need $2 million, or I need $5 million, because that's how much money it's going to take to hire the team I need to hire and build the product I want to build and get it to market and build a company. So obviously, getting money is important. And so a lot of entrepreneurs and founders are mostly focused on the money, and to some extent also at what price the money's going to come, the valuation, the dilution. Those are all, frankly, important, but not, in my opinion, as important as the match between you and your company and the investor, and how aligned you are with them, not just in your vision and the kind of business you want to create, but how you want to go about doing it, and all of that. And what I have found in my career, when I work with companies where me and to some extent my partners and the founder and to some extent the team around them are all in lockstep in terms of how the company should get built, how the product should work, how it's going to be taken to market, what the business model is. Those are our biggest successes. And where we have our problems a lot of times are where we're not really in sync with the company. And I think we don't help each other as much, because we're kind of like, I wouldn't say fighting, but we're not necessarily kind of like in lockstep. And and founders often complain about venture capitalists and how bad they are, and I think that a lot of that is frankly true, but I think it's also the case that they didn't pick very well. That they ended up picking investors who weren't a particularly good choice for them, and they picked the investor who gave them the highest price, or they picked the investor who was the first one to show up with a check or whatever, and they weren't as picky as they needed to be. And particularly in this day and age, there is a lot of capital out there. I know everybody who's a founder is like, well, how come I can't get the money? But the truth of the matter is there is a lot of sources of capital out there. Everything from angel networks to strategic investors to venture capitalists, and now with crypto, there's all that going on too. So there's a lot of places you can go for the money. And so you need to be strategic about it. You need to think about what you are going to need from an investor, and make sure that you just don't take the easy deal, the one that's just there for you. Make sure to get what you deserve, which is more than money. It's alignment, it's shared vision, and a long-term commitment to your company. And that takes a little bit more work, but I'm telling you the payoff is going to be tenfold. And give you an example of that. We walked around the room before things got going, and we talked to maybe, I don't know, a half a dozen or more entrepreneurs, and every single entrepreneur that I talked to was working on something interesting. And I could see why each and every one of those companies deserved financing, and frankly, I think we'll get financing, but I probably wasn't the right investor for most of those companies for lots of different reasons, because I don't have an expertise in the domain they're working in, or because I don't particularly have a passion for what they're doing, or our firm doesn't invest in those kinds of things. There's all sorts of reasons why I might not be the right investor for those companies. And when people reach out to me or pitch me or whatever, and I'm not the right investor for their companies, I like to tell them, like, you have a great idea. You're going to make a great company, and there's lots of people who are going to want to invest in your company. I don't happen to be one of them, but don't let that bum you out, because there's just not a good fit here. And they still sort of take that as rejection, and I feel bad about it. But I like to really limit what I invest in to the projects that I know I can be super helpful on, and I'm going to wake up every day super excited to work with the entrepreneur on that. And that's it's not every company out there. And so, but I do think there's an investor or a group of investors for every single company that's going to present tonight, and the trick is finding it. And so, a couple of tricks, I think, to how you find that. There's a reason, by the way, that I write a blog. Well, there's a lot of reasons why I write a blog, but one of the reasons I write a blog is that I like to sort of telegraph to the world what I'm interested in. And so what that does is it attracts entrepreneurs who are working on projects that I'm inclined to be interested in, and it also, to some extent, makes it less likely that people are going to approach me on things that I'm not interested in. Not that many venture capitalists write as much as I do, so that's probably not the best way to find people who are likely interested in what you are. But what you can do is you can take a look at people's portfolios, which are really now out there on the internet. You can really do a lot of research on investors, and you can start to look at, oh, look, they've got a lot of investments in the domain I'm working in. They seem to be particularly interested in companies that are doing these sorts of things. That's kind of what I'm doing. I should go talk to these people. So it is real work, but I think in a way, if you had to spend 40 hours, I think you'd be better off spending 40 hours figuring out who the 10 best investors are for your company and then going and pitching them than spending 40 hours pitching 40 investors just kind of like that you randomly met through a friend or something like that. So, really do the work up front, kind of figure out who the right investors are for you, and then and learn a bunch about them so that when you go and meet them, you can talk about some of the other things they're working on. Investors like to do that. and then you'll find, I think, your match, and you'll be off to the races. So that is my message to all of you tonight, and hopefully you'll do some of that. Thank you.